You planted them because you loved your yard. The azaleas along the fence, the rhododendron by the back porch, the wisteria climbing the garden wall. You planted them for color, for beauty, for the bees, and because somewhere you read that native plants and garden flowers were good for wildlife. You did everything right. You built something beautiful. And some of it has been poisoning the birds that visit it. Not all of it. Not everything in your garden is dangerous. But several of the most common, most beloved plants in American yards are genuinely toxic to birds, and the birds that eat their berries, drink from standing water near their roots, or feed on insects that have processed their nectar are being harmed in ways you cannot see and were never told about. This is not a story about bad gardening. This is a story about information that almost nobody shares with backyard birders, and today we are sharing it. Welcome back to Backyard Bird Mind. Subscribe before you leave, because what you are about to learn is something that will change the way you look at your garden the next time you walk through it. Today, we are covering the plants most likely to harm the birds in your yard, what the toxicity actually does to a bird's body, and what you can replace them with. Native alternatives that are genuinely safe and genuinely beneficial. Stay until the end, because the last plant on this list is the one that surprises people the most. It is in almost every yard in America. It looks completely harmless, and it has been there for years. Number 1. Azaleas and Rhododendrons, the beautiful killers. These are two of the most planted ornamental shrubs in American yards. In the southeastern United States, they are almost universal.
In the Pacific Northwest, they grow larger than most people's first apartments. They bloom in spring with a color so vivid it has become synonymous with the season itself. They are also significantly toxic to birds. The toxin is called grayanotoxin. It is found in every part of the plant: the leaves, the flowers, the nectar, and the pollen. For most insects, it is not a problem. For birds, particularly smaller songbirds like warblers, finches, and chickadees, ingestion of grayanotoxin disrupts the sodium channels in heart and nerve cells. It can cause disorientation, weakness, abnormal heart rhythm, and, in significant doses, death. Research on grayanotoxin poisoning in birds has documented cases in robins, waxwings, and thrushes following feeding events where the birds consumed large quantities of rhododendron plant material. The birds most at risk are those that eat the berries and seeds that form after the flowers drop. Not every bird avoids them, and some learn to, but many do not. The practical issue in your yard is this: every bird that visits your azalea or rhododendron for insects, nectar, or fallen plant material is exposing itself to a toxin your garden is producing continuously. Watch for this in your yard. If your rhododendron has birds visiting frequently, observe what they are doing. Birds feeding on insects on the surface of the plant are at lower risk than birds consuming the flowers, pollen, or any berries directly. Number 2. Wisteria, the one everyone has and almost nobody warns about. Wisteria is one of the most visually dramatic plants in the American garden. The cascade of purple flowers in spring is one of the most photographed garden scenes in the country.
It grows fast, it covers fences and pergolas beautifully, and it smells extraordinary. It is also toxic to birds. All parts of the plant contain lectins and wisterin, compounds that cause gastrointestinal distress, vomiting, and neurological symptoms in birds that consume them. The seed pods that form after flowering are particularly dangerous because they look like food and remain on the plant through fall and winter when other food sources are scarce. The problem is timing. Spring and early summer, when wisteria is flowering, is also when birds are feeding nestlings. A parent bird that forages near wisteria and consumes even small amounts of plant material can pass those compounds to nestlings through regurgitation. The nestlings, with their undeveloped systems, are far more vulnerable than adult birds. There is a second problem with wisteria that is separate from its toxicity. Asian wisteria, the most commonly planted variety in American yards, is an invasive species across much of the eastern United States. It grows aggressively, can girdle and kill mature trees, and spreads beyond the garden into natural areas. The birds in your yard need intact native trees. A wisteria that begins as an ornamental on a pergola can become a genuine threat to the trees that provide nesting sites and insect habitat for those same birds over time. This does not mean that every bird near your wisteria will be harmed, but it does mean that your wisteria, beautiful as it is a risk factor in your yard that almost nobody talks about. Number 3. Lantana, the one that looks like it was made for birds. This is where the surprise factor is highest. Lantana is sold at every garden center in America, marketed specifically for pollinators and wildlife. The packaging often features butterflies and hummingbirds. It comes in vivid clusters of orange, red, yellow, and pink. It looks like exactly what you would plant if you were trying to attract birds. The berries that form on lantana after flowering are toxic. The unripe berries, which are green, contain lantadidine, a compound that causes photosensitization, liver damage, and gastrointestinal distress in birds. American robins, cedar waxwings, and mockingbirds are among the species spliced to occupy and consume lantana berries. The ripe dark berries are less toxic than the unripe ones, but the plant continues producing berries at all stages simultaneously, and birds do not distinguish between ripe and unripe. The American Bird Conservancy has flagged lantana specifically as a plant that backyard birders should be cautious about, noting the disconnect between its marketing as a wildlife plant and its actual toxicity profile. Here is what matters most. If you have lantana in your yard, it is almost certainly attracting birds, and some of those birds are eating the berries. The solution is not difficult, but knowing the problem exists is the first step. Number 4. English ivy, the invasive that covers everything and helps almost nothing. English ivy is in millions of American yards. It covers fences, climbs trees, fills in the spaces under hedges and around foundations. It is evergreen, which means it provides visual interest in winter. It requires almost no maintenance once established, and it produces berries in fall and winter that birds eat. Those berries contain triterpenoid saponins, compounds that are toxic to birds in sufficient quantities.
The toxicity is cumulative, meaning a bird that eats small amounts of English ivy berries over multiple days or weeks can accumulate enough of the compound to cause harm even if no single feeding event was dangerous. Beyond its direct toxicity, English ivy is an invasive species across most of the eastern United States. It spreads aggressively from yards into natural areas, smothering native ground cover and the native understory plants that birds have evolved alongside. The birds in your yard are adapted to native plants. English ivy replaces those plants with a monoculture that provides far less insect habitat, fewer caterpillars, and fewer of the food sources that native birds need across their full life cycle. The Audubon Society and American Bird Conservancy both recommend removing English ivy from residential properties and replacing it with native alternatives, wild ginger, native violets, or low-growing native ground covers that support the insect base birds depend on. Number 5. Foxglove, and the category of plants nobody checks. Foxglove is one of the most beautiful plants in the American cottage garden. The tall spikes of tubular flowers are dramatic, the bees love them, and they have a long association with traditional gardens. They are also highly toxic. Every part of the plant contains digitalis glycosides, the same compounds used in heart medication at controlled doses, and capable of causing cardiac arrest in birds at the doses available from plant consumption. But foxglove represents a category of plants beyond just itself. The lesson of foxglove is that beautiful, beloved, widely planted garden plants are not screened for wildlife safety before they go on sale.
The gardening industry does not have a requirement to disclose toxicity to birds on plant labels. You cannot assume that a plant is safe for birds because it is widely sold, because it attracts pollinators, or because it has been in your garden for years without obvious harm. The birds in your yard are resilient. They avoid many toxic plants through learned behavior, through smell, through instinct, but not all of them, and not all the time. And the birds that have built trust with your yard, that choose to nest nearby, that bring their fledglings to your feeders, are the birds most exposed to whatever your garden contains. Number 6. What to do today, and what to plant instead. The goal is not a bare yard. The goal is a yard that gives the birds what they came for, without hidden risks in the plants around them. The most effective thing you can do is replace high-risk ornamentals with native species that have co-evolved with the birds in your region. Native plants support between 10 and 50 times more caterpillar species than ornamental non-natives, according to research from the University of Delaware by entomologist Doug Tallamy. Caterpillars are the most critical food source for nestlings across almost every North American songbird species. A yard with native plants is not just safer, it is exponentially more nutritious for the birds that visit it. Instead of azaleas and rhododendrons, plant native viburnums, native hollies, or native serviceberry. They provide safe berries, abundant insect habitat, and equal or greater visual interest through the seasons.
Instead of English ivy, plant native ground covers, wild ginger, native ferns, creeping phlox, or Virginia creeper, which produces berries that are genuinely safe and beloved by many songbird species. Instead of lantana, plant native coneflowers, native black-eyed Susans, or native salvias.
They support pollinators without the toxicity risk, and they produce seeds that birds eat directly through fall and winter. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Native Plant Finder and the Audubon Society's Native Plant Database both allow you to search by zip code for the native species best suited to your specific region. The search takes 5 minutes. The impact lasts for every bird that visits your yard for the rest of the time you tend it. Your yard is not a danger zone, but it is likely not as safe as you thought it was. The plants you have been tending, the ones you chose carefully, watered through dry summers, pruned back each spring, some of them have been working against what you built the yard to do, not because you made a mistake, because nobody told you. And that matters, because the birds that visit your yard are not abstract wildlife, they are individuals. The cardinal that arrives first every morning, the chickadee that has been getting progressively closer since last spring, the family of robins that used the same corner of the lawn every day for a month while the fledglings were learning to forage. Those birds have built a relationship with your yard. They chose it over every other yard in the neighborhood. What you do with your plants is part of what they chose. Now you know.
And changing even one plant, removing the English ivy from the fence, replacing the lantana with native coneflowers, is a real and immediate improvement for every bird that visits your yard this season. It does not require redoing everything at once. It requires starting somewhere. You built something for them. This is how you make it safer. Tell me in the comments, do you have any of these plants in your yard right now? And if you have already made the switch to native plants, I want to hear how the birds responded. I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.